Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, aka Eddie Brock, let the devil in. In this video we're breaking down the brand new trailer for Venom Let There Be Carnage. That wasn't an invite to thumbs down the video, by the way. Now the movie releases September 15th in the UK and on the 23rd in the US, which means we're in the August endgame now. There's a lot to unpack from this new look, and in it we'll be going over the Easter eggs, hidden details, things you missed, and how it links up with the first trailer. We'll also be discussing what some of the plot leaks say to add some context to the shots, so if you don't want anything ruined, then I recommend that you turn off now. Also, smash the thumbs up button so I don't Eddie block you, and make sure you subscribe if you think the movie is going to be the greatest love story of all time. Oh yeah. Now when we last saw Eddie, he was operating as somewhat of a vigilante in the streets of San Francisco. He and Venom made a rule of no eating people, which we saw referenced in the first trailer. The post-credit scene of the prior movie ended with Brock being called to San Quentin by Cletus Cassidy, who promised him that there will let there be carnage. Now he had written "Welcome Eddie" in his own blood, and in the prior trailer we saw that Kasady was writing a postcard to Brock in red ink, which may have been the same thing. This is the very same postcard that Brock gets in his apartment, and it brings everything full circle. Now going off everything we've seen so far, I actually have a theory that Cletus sent his blood out, Carnage was then born from Venom and became attached to it on the postcard, and then it came back into the prison with Brock. Cletus then potentially bit into Brock, and as it was already bonded with him, it was able to immediately latch on. If we jump back to the first movie, you might remember that the idea of hosts having to be a perfect match with the symbiote was paramount to them getting attached to someone, and therefore Carnage, knowing in advance that it can align with Cletus through his blood, would make it seek after him. Circuses confirm that the sequel is set a year and a half after the first movie, and we see how life has massively changed for Brock, with him now living in somewhat of a mess due to them pretty much being an odd couple. You might have also seen that there was a leaked featurette which dropped last month, discussing the movie in more detail. Though it was taken down by Sony, Circus said they were pretty much constantly bickering like an old couple, and Harrelson stated he couldn't believe how funny the performance was, especially getting to see Hardy without the CGI just going off on himself. Now we start with Brock sitting on his Ducati, which he had in the first film. He parked this in front of his work and had a buddy moment with the security guard who, you never know, they might bring back for this. Brock and Venom are clearly on different pages to one another, and they're disagreeing over a lot of things. Eddie wants him to remain in control, whereas Venom wants to break free. Now speaking of breaks, he breaks Eddie's nose at one point, and you might remember that in the first film he was able to fix wounds like this pretty easily, so he doesn't mind doing it again. Because of this constant back and forth in the trailer, I think that Venom might see Carnage roaming the streets and doing what he wants, and he may even decide to join him at some point. Carnage of course comes from Venom, and he represents the darker path that Venom could go down. Brock returns to San Quentin once more, and Cletus says that he wants to give him his story. We then see a dig being carried out, in which there are several forensic teams looking for bodies. We can also catch cadaver dogs, and it's clear that this excavation is unearthing the remains of several people. According to the leaks, Cletus called Eddie to the prison to reveal several of his hidden victims, and this is why the authorities were angry with Brock for cracking the case when they couldn't. We then see a headline for the Daily Bugle which says "Inside the Mind of Serial Killer Cletus Cassidy." The first paragraph reads about the exclusive report from Eddie Brock, in which they dig into his past and what made him the way that he is. Now Brock seems to be working for the Daily Bugle, which is carrying the exact same logo as what it was in the Raimiverse. In the last film he of course lost his job and his fiancée, and he did end up looking for other work. This obviously isn't connected to the Raimiverse directly because that already had that amazing Venom in it, but certain things do clearly come across. The MCU version is also an InfoWars-esque parody, so I doubt that this will lead directly into the universe, and Circus has made it pretty clear that it's not connected, even though we know it's all connected. Now how they handle the entire thing with the multiverse we don't know, as No Way Home is supposed to usher in several characters from across multiple franchises. This has already been confirmed by Alfred Molina and Jamie Foxx. I kind of feel like that movie will end with the multiverse further being cracked open, and the characters will then be able to jump across. You might remember that when it was announced that Spider-Man would remain in the MCU, that Kevin Feige said he'll be the first character that can jump across franchises, and personally I think he'll be used to potentially bring Eddie into the main timeline, or they might just keep it separate. You just don't know. Maybe Brock can do some investigating to find out why we still haven't had a Spider-Man No Way Home trailer yet. Where is it? I'm sick of this. Where is it? Now just below the laptop we can see a note from Cletus, and potentially this could be one of the things he was scribbling in his cell. It does look a lot like the child drawings that were carved into the walls, and it says, "To thee the strife was given between the suffering." This is from Prometheus by Lord Byron, and Prometheus was of course about someone who took fire from the gods and gave it to the mortals. We'll talk about the tiebacks to God later on in the video, but there's clearly a lot of religious imagery going on. Now in the comics, Kasady was a complete psychopath that relished the idea of taking lives and the power that murdering someone could hold over them. When Kasady was growing up, he was actually abused by his father, who also beat his mother in front of him. Kasady gained a massive inferiority complex in which he felt weak in comparison to his dad, and thus the only way he felt like he could be more powerful or his equal was to cause pain to others. Like most serial killers, he started torturing animals and then he moved on to people. Sometimes superhero movies will give you a villain that you can relate to, but in the case of Cletus, there was absolutely nothing redeemable about the character. I think he's probably going to be one of the most sadistic and evil comic book characters ever put to screen. I genuinely can't think of anyone off the top of my head in the Marvel Universe that is as irredeemable as him, and it's going to be interesting to see how they handle the pair. To make matters worse, Carnage is a complete psychopath too, and together they're just the worst people ever. Now Cletus ended up killing his grandmother by pushing her down a flight of steps, and he also attempted to electrocute his mother. She managed to avoid this just before it happened, and broken by her husband's abuse, she lashed out at Cletus and attempted to kill him. Cletus's dad then murdered her, but whether he did it or it was actually Cletus, we don't know for definite. Cletus was then taken to the St. Esther's orphanage, where he was mocked further, and he ended up burning down the location, which we could potentially catch in the trailers. I think this shot is probably set in present day though, and the pair that we see are likely Shriek and Carnage, who I think grew up there together. They might be returning there to destroy it as part of their rampage, which we'll get into more detail later on in the video. Now Kasady is then taken to his execution, and we know from the first trailer that the blood inside him pushes the lethal injection back, further tying to this idea of blood. This may be a nod to the blood of Christ, further alluding to the idea that Carnage sees himself as a god. Cut to him with an altar and candles around it, and clearly he's holding some kind of service. The way that he transforms is also much different to Brock's, and rather than the symbiote warping itself around him, it seems like it's actually part of his body, potentially coming out of his blood cells. Now in the first trailer, we could catch Mulligan reading a paper with a map behind him that had the Tenderloin district highlighted with lines around it. Shout out to Eric Voss from New Rockstars for pointing out that this is an area in San Francisco that has a high homeless population, and this could mean the movie might pull from absolute carnage. In that, Carnage creates carnage drones out of homeless people, and there's a heavy focus on worshipping the god Null. The title Let There Be Carnage could also be a reference to the Bible, namely the line Let There Be Light. The movie also seems to be taking a heavy focus on church and crucifixion imagery, so potentially we'll get callbacks to this comic and how Carnage is seen as a deity. Cut to the prison break, which I'm guessing happens in the midst of his escape, and we see how unstoppable he is as a monster. No matter how many bullets they put into him, there's no effect, and he warps his weapons around him before sticking his tongue down another dude's throat, which I'm sure happens in prison quite a lot. Now we see more shots of the Ravencroft Institute and also Shriek. Ravencroft is pretty much the Belle Reve of Marvel, and this location houses a number of supervillains. It was also seen in the Amazing Spider-Man 2 as being the amazing place that Elektra was experimented on. Now in the comics, both Carnage and Shriek were prisoners at Ravencroft, but together they managed to escape. Shriek and Carnage are in a relationship, and speaking of relationships, I actually googled heavy spoilers over the weekend, and top result in the related search was heavy spoilers wife. I see you YouTube, I see you. I know it was you googling her 500 times a day. I know it was you. Now she's able to let off highly powerful sonic blasts. I'm not talking about Shriek there, you're having that. But we are also talking about Shriek, to be fair. Now this is why we can see guards around her cell wearing giant earmuffs. There's also some soundproofing and metal doors to dampen the noise, and potentially Carnage is springing her loose so that they can go on a killing spree. This actually calls back to the comics, and after the pair escaped Ravencroft, they went on one in New York. This would tie back to them burning down the St. Esther's home, and we can also see him attacking the facility, which we can tell due to the structures around the building that line up with how Ravencroft looks. From here the helicopter swoops in, and we catch two people riding in a car. Later we can see that this is Shriek driving, so I'm guessing that the pair have just escaped, or that they're driving away from St. Esther's. Cletus finds out Anne Anne through a photo, and we later learn that she's engaged to the guy from the first movie. That's some of a bitch. Actually, he was alright. But yeah, Venom makes Eddie punch him in the face. Potentially, he might let Carnage kill her fiance, and that would be pretty convenient for Eddie to just slide back in. I'm sure he's still got a key. Now we cut to the church in which Venom refuses to come out because Carnage is a red one. This is clearly calling back to Maximum Carnage, in which the finale took place in a church. I also think we catch Kasady in Mrs. Chen's store kicking someone in the face. He refers to Eddie as family, and tying back to the idea of blood, they may even be seen as blood brothers with one another. Everything goes to hell and the pair face off, and as always in these trailers, we end with a joke, which yeah, just kill him. Just kill him. Now we know that Stephen Graham is playing a character called Mulligan, which could be a nod to Patrick Mulligan, aka Toxin. In the comics, he was an offshoot of Carnage, and just in the same way that the first movie set Cletus up as a villain, we could see the seeds being sown here for Venom 3, Let There Be Toxin. Now as for my thoughts on the trailer, I always say this, yeah, but I feel like people don't believe me. I actually enjoyed the first Venom movie. It's one of my guilty pleasures, I'll admit that, but I do have a lot of fun when I'm watching it, especially that lobster scene. Now I knew this trailer was coming today, so I actually watched that film last night, and it has got me quite excited for what's to come. I really want Sony to lean into that overly dark aesthetic that the MCU doesn't really do, as this is something that can really set them apart. Just in the same way that the new Suicide Squad movie was James Gunn turned up to 11 and not beholden to any overarching universe or reigns from Disney, Sony has the potential here to just go crazy with it and show us some really messed up things. Serial killer documentaries are some of the most popular things online, and I think they have the opportunity here to make people fascinated with Kasady even if they can't condone anything that he does. That's really what I want to see in the movie, and I didn't mention this last time, but I'm actually surprised at how much the movie seems in line with the first one. Often when you change directors, the shots and style look a lot different, but Serkis has done a really good job of making things seem like a continuation of the first. Overall, yeah, really excited for it, and we have What If, Shang-Chi, and this all coming in August and September, so it's going to be a great time to be a Marvel fan. As always, let me know your thoughts on the new look below, and just to let you know, we're running a competition right now and giving away 3 MCU box sets on the 30th of August. All you have to do to be in with a chance of winning is like the video, make sure you subscribe with notifications on, and drop a comment below with your thoughts on the trailer. We pick the comments at random at the end of the month, and the winners of the last one are on screen right now, so if that's you, then message me on Twitter at Heavy Spoilers. If you want something else to watch, then we've just done a big breakdown of Suicide Squad, which will be linked on screen right now. I know it's not out in the US, but if you're in the UK and have already had a chance to see it, definitely go check it out, as we've got some cool Easter eggs in there, and just our thoughts on the film in general and where things could be going. If not, then thank you for sitting until the end of the video. I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.